You've created your environment and you're fostering positive relationships. Now you need to clearly define expectations that support students to work and interact successfully. Setting and maintaining expectations is the third practice in the Culture and Climate Playbook. We define expectations as specific statements of behavior that support students in their environment. When expectations are explicitly taught, they provide a solid foundation guiding students in their interactions with both adults and peers. We never assume that students know what we expect from them. Our students are in many different environments, such as a resource room, gymnasium, the LRC, and the nurse's office, as well as in classrooms. The environment also changes, of course, when we move between face-to-face instruction and remote learning. Each of these environments require educators to identify and teach our expectations. Clearly communicated expectations result in students feeling a sense of safety, fostering in them a growth mindset. Clear expectations lead to behavioral success when students understand the norms established for the community. And of course, if students understand what is expected from them as they work, they will also experience academic success. When students struggle in any of these areas, a first step in problem solving is to ask yourself, how clear have I been in communicating expectations to my students? We will begin with tips for identifying and teaching clear expectations for students. We know you're excited to get started with your students. Your excitement and positive attitude is really important. You're taking on a lot by starting a new job. Current events are also adding onto your plate as a new educator. Therefore, along with maintaining your positive attitude, we want you to begin with this. Tip number 1, set realistic expectations for yourself. This means being sensible about the work you can do. Give yourself grace to be a learner and not have to know everything at once. As a district, we support not only students, but the adults who care for them. You will find support, initiatives, and professional learning courses focused on helping you to be emotionally resilient, especially in times of uncertainty. In the resources section, you may want to read the blog, Teaching Through a Pandemic, a Mindset for the Moment. The article defines new attitudes we need to adopt, like allowing ourselves to make errors and remaining patient as we learn new ways of doing. As you establish a new way of learning for your students this year, allow yourself to learn a new way of educating too. Tip number 2, support growth mindset with students. Students will need support in developing and maintaining positive and productive attitudes for the challenges ahead. As part of the expectations we set with students, we need to incorporate the concept of growth mindset in our language and our activities. Students with a growth mindset believe that overcoming challenges is possible through effort. Check out the video in the resources section with an explanation of the impact growth mindset has on student learning, as explained by Dr. Carol Dweck. There are numerous resources for teaching and reinforcing growth mindset, such as from Khan Academy and Class Dojo. Many of these resources include videos you can share with students to start your discussion about growth mindset. Speaking of videos, multimedia is a great strategy for engaging students in remote learning. Search YouTube for videos on growth mindset or any other topic. In the resources section, you can learn how to save your YouTube videos into playlists to keep your resources organized. You can also share playlists with your students. Tip number 3, identify norms for remote learning. Just as you clearly identify expectations in face-to-face settings, you will need to identify expectations for remote learning. Check out the D303 Playbook strategies linked in the resources section for guidelines on how to structure those expectations. Strategies such as ATM and CHAMPS help identify areas in which students need specific guidelines to participate productively. Finally, remember to involve students in identifying the norms they need to feel respected and comfortable in order to participate in the different remote learning activities. Tip number 4, don't make assumptions. As you set expectations, reflect on assumptions you may be making about your students in their remote learning environments. These are things we can't assume. There's an adult who can offer assistance. A student has a space or materials to work on their learning. Learning time is free from distractions and other interruptions. While our students are tech savvy, we also cannot assume they automatically know how to use all the tech tools in our lessons. Providing clear directions is essential in remote learning. One way to model the directions is to create a GIF to demonstrate a short series of steps. A GIF is an animated image that loops. GIFs can be added as an image in Google Docs or slides. In the resources section, you'll find tutorials on how to use Screencastify, a tool commonly used in our district to create recordings of your screen. You'll also see how Screencastify can be used to create those GIFs. Tip number 5, make your learning expectations clear. Students can only follow expectations if we provide them. This is true both for our expectations for their behaviors and for their work. Therefore, include learning targets in each activity you do with students. Whether in a classroom or resource setting, students benefit from knowing what to expect. Setting these learning goals also has a positive impact on student achievement. There is not one specific way to communicate learning targets, as you can see in these examples. Choose or create a routine that make learning targets a meaningful part of your work with students. Regardless of the model you choose to use, be sure to phrase learning targets in student-friendly language using clear and concise statements. Next, we'll look at ways to help students remember and follow the expectations you set. Tip number 6, keep expectations and norms visible. At school, these hang on the walls for quick and regular reference. In the remote environment, educators remind students of expectations by incorporating reminders regularly in lessons and assignments. Norms, anchor charts, syllabuses, and other documents that students need regular access to can be organized in the same space. Use folders in Schoology and Seesaw and topics in Google Classroom, and teach your students to regularly use these spaces to retrieve these resources. Tip number 7, show what success looks like. Once you've defined your expectations, you can clarify understanding with students by showing them what success looks like. In a remote setting, this is even more critical to support students in a variety of learning environments. One way to show this is to provide a model or demonstration to students. You could also help students understand what you're expecting through the use of examples and non-examples. Finally, if you have a rubric for the activity, share it with students before they begin their work. These strategies are very adaptable in a remote environment. Screencastify is an easy tool to record both you and your screen to support demonstrations. You can even add annotations to your video. Google Classroom and Schoology both allow teachers to attach rubrics to assignments so students can see this information as they work. You may already be familiar with Flipgrid. It's a tool you'll see recommended throughout this course. One feature of Flipgrid, similar to Schoology or Classroom, is that you can also attach a rubric to an assignment for students to reference. Tutorials for these ideas are in the references section. Check them out. Tip number 8, build in opportunities to respond. Keeping students active in your lessons is another strategy to ensure they are meeting your expectations. Opportunities to respond, OTR, are frequent pauses in instruction that allows students to actively participate. Turn and talk is a common example of an OTR. The more OTRs you create in your lessons, the more likely students will be able to meet your expectations. Frequent OTRs also increase student engagement in instruction. When this video pauses and prompts you to respond, you are doing an OTR. We added OTRs to our videos using Edpuzzle. In the resources section, you will find directions on how to create your own Edpuzzle videos with OTRs. There are many great tools that can be added to digital content to build in opportunities to respond. Some commonly used tools in the district are Padlet, Google Forms, and Nearpod. If you're interested in learning a new tool to support OTRs in your lessons, check out the tutorials linked on our resources page. Tip number 9, prompt students to reflect on expectations. Make reflection a regular part of your remote learning routines. For instance, after a synchronous meeting on Google Meet or on Schoology conferences, reflect on participation norms. Reflect on how a growth mindset was applied. Following a lesson, post a question for students to reflect on their understanding of the learning target. In the resources section, we'll share some strategies on what reflection could look like in Seesaw, Classroom, and Schoology. Reflecting keeps expectations present in students' mind and provides you with valuable formative information. Our final tip, tip number 10, is coach students who aren't meeting expectations. When students don't meet expectations in school, what do? The reason students don't meet our stated expectations increase in remote learning, but the response is the same. We coach students to success the best we can. More important than academics in this unprecedented time are the ways we show care for our students. Rather than consequences, work with students to help them work successfully. One strategy in the remote learning environment is to have students meet with you on Google Meet or Schoology conferences and share their screen with you. By looking at assignments together in real time, educator and student can problem solve to overcome barriers preventing his or her progress. Educators communicate expectations to provide a solid foundation for interactions between adults and students, as well as for students to students. Clear expectations increase students' psychological safety, academic success, and behavioral performance. When students struggle in any of these areas, a first step in problem solving is to ask yourself, how clear and consistent have I been in setting and maintaining expectations in our environment? Now it's time for you to personalize your learning with resources supporting these tips.